Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 28, Keshab Chandra Sen and the Brahmo Samaj. In March 1875, about a year before his mother's passing, an important event took place in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, which was destined to produce far-reaching results. It was his meeting with the celebrated Brahmo leader and preacher, Keshab Chandra Sen, undeniably the greatest figure of the Brahmo movement of the time. A great scholar and eloquent orator of an exceedingly religious turn of mind, Keshab, from a lieutenant to Maharshi Devendranath Tagore, advanced to the leadership of the forward section of the Brahmos and founded the Bharatvarshia Brahmo Samaj. His character and attainments made him the idol of a large number of ardent truth seekers, and his influence on the educated youths of the day was great. Hearing of his piety, Sri Ramakrishna wished to meet him. He had seen him meditating long ago at the Brahmo Samaj and had remarked that of all the boys there, he was the only one whose meditation was successful. He also had a vision of him in Samadhi in which he saw a peacock with a ruby in its head, spreading its tail. The unfurled tail, as he said afterwards, signified Keshab's followers and the ruby his Rajasic nature. Keshab was at this time staying with some of his followers in the garden house of Joygopal Sen at Belgaria, a couple of miles from Dakshineshwar. One afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna, accompanied by Hriday, went in Captain Vishwanath's carriage to see him. Hriday went in first to announce his uncle's arrival. Hearing that a great devotee had come to talk with him on spiritual matters, Keshab asked Hriday to show him in. Sri Ramakrishna was plainly dressed in a dhoti with a red border, one end of which was thrown across his left shoulder. Keshab and the other Brahmos at first found nothing remarkable about him. Finally, Sri Ramakrishna said, "I hear that you have seen God, so I have come here to hear about it." The ensuing conversation held Keshab and his followers under its spell. Sri Ramakrishna then sang a song of Kali the Mother, with his usual fervor, in the course of which he fell into Samadhi. Keshab and the others were not much impressed by this trance, as such states were unfamiliar to them. But when they saw Hriday recall his uncle to ordinary consciousness by chanting the sacred Om in his ears, they were amazed. Sri Ramakrishna's face was beaming with a divine radiance. A torrent of inspiring words followed, which went straight to the hearts of the listeners. He spoke of the innumerable manifestations of one and the same infinite God, illustrating it by the following parables. Some blind men happened to come across an elephant. Someone told them what it was and asked them to describe it as it seemed to them. The one who touched the legs said, "The elephant is like a column." The second one said, "The elephant is like a winnowing fan." He had felt one of its ears. Similarly, those who had touched its trunk or belly gave different opinions. So, with God, everyone conceives him according to his experience. A man who had seen a chameleon under a tree returned and said, "I have seen a beautiful red chameleon under the tree." Another said, "I was there before you. The chameleon is not red, but green. I have seen it with my own eyes." A third said, "I too know it well. I saw it before either of you, and it was neither red nor green, and I saw it with my own eyes. It was blue." Others declared it was yellow or gray, and so on. Soon they began to quarrel among themselves as to who was correct. A man passing by asked what was the trouble. When he was told, he said, "I live under that very tree, and I know the chameleon well." "All of you are right, everyone. The chameleon is sometimes green, sometimes blue. It is all colors by turn, and sometimes it is absolutely colorless." He ridiculed the attempt of the human mind to fathom the nature of God by comparing it to an ant that desired to carry a whole sugar hill in its mouth. "It is God's grace," he said, "that leads to realization." There was something in the manner of his speech that convinced Keshab that Sri Ramakrishna must have actually seen God. Stupefied and puzzled, Keshab Chandra, the high priest of the Brahmo cult, felt like a child before this man of realization and listened to him with the utmost reverence. He opened the doors of his heart, and every word uttered by the master found a permanent niche there. At the end of the discourse, the master said to Keshab, "Your tail has dropped." Finding that the audience did not understand him, he explained, "You must have seen tadpoles. So long as they have tails, they must live in water, but when they drop off, they can live on land as well as in water. Similarly, so long as a man has his tale of nescience, he can live only in the pool of the world. But as soon as he loses his nescience, he can live in God or in the world just as he pleases. Your mind, Keshab, is in such a state now. You can live in the world and enjoy divine bliss as well." After spending some delightful hours in this way, Sri Ramakrishna took his leave and returned to Dakshineshwar. Keshab was deeply attracted by Sri Ramakrishna. Desirous of knowing more of him, he sent some of his followers to Dakshineshwar to watch Sri Ramakrishna and to report. He with some of his devotees visited the master frequently, and long hours were spent in spiritual discussion. Gradually they became very close. Sri Ramakrishna sometimes visited Keshab in Calcutta, and every year on the anniversary of the Brahmo Samaj, Keshab with his party either visited Dakshineshwar or invited Sri Ramakrishna to the Samaj. On many occasions, Keshab came to Dakshineshwar with his band of devotees in a special steamer, either to visit with him at the temple or to take him out on the Ganges. The profound influence of Western culture upon Keshab had not destroyed his love for and devotion to God. The wisdom culled from his contact with Sri Ramakrishna, he was eager to share with others, and we find him expounding it in messages of hope and strength, not only from the pulpit, but also in the columns of different newspapers, English and vernacular. One day, at Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna explained to Keshab that Brahman and its inscrutable power were one and the same substance looked at from different standpoints, like fire and its burning property, both equally true. This Keshab understood. Then the master told him that God, his devotee, and his words as embodied in the scriptures were also one and the same thing, which too, Keshab admitted. But when Sri Ramakrishna said that the spiritual guide, the Lord and the devotee were the same, Keshab could not follow him so far. So the master dropped the subject, not wishing to disturb his mind by making him go too fast. Through contact with Sri Ramakrishna, Keshab gradually grasped more and more of the deeper truths of the Vedic path and undertook the requisite discipline to realize them. Keshab had a sincere admiration for Sri Ramakrishna. Whenever he visited Dakshineshwar, he brought with him some offering in the way of fruits, etc., which he reverently placed before the master, and sitting at his feet like a humble disciple, drank in his words of wisdom. One day, the master said to him in fun, "Keshab, you charm people with your eloquence. Let me too. Here's something from you." Keshab modestly replied, "I must not be vending needles in a blacksmith shop. Rather, I should listen to you. It is your words repeated to people that are appreciated so much." In the year 1878, Keshab married off his daughter to the Maharaja of Cooch Behar before she reached the age limit of 14 as laid down by himself in the laws of the Brahmo Samaj. This made a great stir in the Samaj, and a section of the Brahmos seceded from him and founded a new party called the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj. Sri Ramakrishna was sorry for this schism and is said to have remarked, "Birth, death, and marriage are things that depend upon the will of God." Keshab made a mistake in trying to put hard and fast restrictions upon marriage. If anybody criticized Keshab for his action, the master would defend him saying, "Why? What is there so very wrong in it? Keshab is a householder, and by his daughter's marriage he has but discharged the duties of a father without offending religion." Keshab's reputation, however, suffered, and cut to the quick he turned his mind inward and strove henceforth more earnestly for realization. This change in his attitude was reflected in the Samaj of which he was the head. Sri Ramakrishna helped him to dive deep into the profundities of the spiritual realm. Keshab recognized the need of external aids such as homa, tonsure, or wearing the ochre robe, and himself adopted some of them. He understood that great personages like Buddha, Sri Chaitanya, or Jesus were living eternally in spiritual forms, and every one represented a facet of the eternal truth, a channel for the same spiritual current. To realize their ideals in his own life, he took up one or other of these types and meditated on them for some time. Needless to say, Keshab's action was due to the fact that he knew Sri Ramakrishna had gone through a similar process during his sadhana period. For a couple of years, he tried to assimilate the universal ideal of Sri Ramakrishna, that every religion was a path to God, and at the end of that time, gave to the public his understanding of it, under the name of the new dispensation. Words fail to describe the reverence he felt for Sri Ramakrishna. If the master came to the Brahmo Samaj while Keshab was conducting services, he would stop his sermon and alight from the pulpit to greet him. At his home one day, he showed Sri Ramakrishna all the places where he sat or dined or lay or studied, and requested him to bless them so that they might always suggest holy thoughts to his mind. It is even said on reliable authority that he took the master to his meditation room and there worshipped him with flowers. But Keshab, it must be said, could not assimilate Sri Ramakrishna's ideal in toto. For the new dispensation which he preached was an eclectic religion, a collection of the best things from many religions, whereas Sri Ramakrishna's ideal was to allow everyone to follow his own bent, whatever it might be, sincerely and wholeheartedly, without interference. It was not Keshab Chandra Sen alone, but the entire forward section of the Brahmo movement, comprising the Nuvavedhan and the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj, that was profoundly influenced by coming in contact with Sri Ramakrishna. The members of both sections found him joining unreservedly in their prayers and songs, and naturally concluded that he was one of them. Having realized God in his different aspects, relative as well as absolute, Sri Ramakrishna had no difficulty in guiding these devotees along their own lines, at the same time removing their prejudices so that they might concentrate their whole energy upon the search for God. Knowing that they would not be able to follow his teachings in their entirety, he told them to take as much as they could and reject the rest. The Brahmo Samaj was much benefited by the influence of Sri Ramakrishna. He was who instilled into the Brahmos the idea of the motherhood of God. Heretofore, their prayers had consisted mainly in praising his many attributes. Sri Ramakrishna taught them to love God more intensely. "Why do you dwell so much upon the glories of God?" he said one day, addressing Keshab and some of his followers. "Does a son, when with his father, think of his father's possessions, his houses, gardens, horses, and cattle? On the contrary, he thinks of his father's love. He knows that it is proper for a father to maintain his children and look out for their welfare. We are all children of God. So what is there to wonder at in his paternal care of us? The real devotee never thinks about these things. He looks upon God as his very own, his nearest and dearest, and says boldly, 'Thou must fulfill my desires, must reveal thyself to me.' If you dwell so much upon his glories, you cannot think of him as your own, nor can you feel intimate with him. You are awed by his majesty. He is no longer near. No, you must think of him as your nearest and dearest. Then only can you realize him." The Brahmos gained a broader and more comprehensive idea about God from the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. He would say to them, "None can limit God by saying that he has known all about him. He has form, and again he is without form. Who knows how many aspects he has?" To those who thought that God could not have form, that it was a sin to worship him through any image or symbol, Sri Ramakrishna would say, "It is true that water is without form, but when it is frozen into ice, it has a definite form." Similarly, the formless Brahman assumes various forms under the influence of an aspirant's devotion. As a toy apple suggests to one the real apple, or a photograph reminds one of one's absent father, so images or symbols help the devotee to the vision of God as he really is. The Brahmos began to understand that there was much significance behind the image worship, a practice which they used to call idolatry. From Sri Ramakrishna, they learnt that Brahman and its manifestation are inseparable. Being correlated ideas, each presupposes the other. They realized that a man fell into the same error by saying that God is formless only, as the man who tries to confine him to a particular image or symbol. Any conception of God, taken singly, represents only one of his aspects. In reality, God immanent in the universe is his aspect with form, without form, but still endowed with attributes. He is called the Ishvara, the creator, preserver, and destroyer of the universe. And as the transcendent reality, the absolute, without forms or attributes, he is the substratum of all that is finite, of everything that is conceivable, including even the idea of the Ishvara. It is clear to anyone who thinks at all that such comprehensive understanding of the truth will eventually reconcile all sects and denominations. Pratap Chandra Majumdar, Keshab's associate, summed up the wonderful versatility of Sri Ramakrishna's character in an illuminating article contributed to the Theistic Quarterly Review. He wrote, "What is his religion? It is Orthodox Hinduism, but Hinduism of a strange type. Ramakrishna Paramahansa, for that is the name of this saint, is the worshipper of no particular Hindu god. He is not a Sivite, he is not a Sakta, he is not a Vaishnava, he is not a Vedantist. Yet he is all these. He worships Shiva, he worships Kali, he worships Rama, he worships Krishna, and is a confirmed advocate of Vedantic doctrines. He is an idolater, yet is a faithful and most devoted meditator of the perfections of the one formless, infinite deity, whom he terms Akhanda Satchitananda, indivisible existence, knowledge, bliss. To him, each of these deities is a force, an incarnated principle tending to reveal the supreme relation of the soul to that eternal and formless being who is unchangeable in his blessedness and light of wisdom. These incarnations, he says, are but the forces Shakti and dispensations Leela of the eternally wise and blessed Akhanda Satchitananda, who can never be changed or formulated, who is one endless and everlasting ocean of light, truth, and joy. So long as he is spared to us, gladly shall we sit at his feet to learn from him the sublime precepts of purity, unworldliness, spirituality, and inebriation in the love of God." The same writer states in another article, "He by his childlike bhakti, by his strong conceptions of an ever-ready motherhood, helped to unfold it, God as our mother, in our minds wonderfully. By associating with him, we learnt to realize better the divine attributes as distributed over the 330 millions of deities of India, the gods of the Puranas." This testimony goes to show how Sri Ramakrishna revolutionized in many respects the spiritual outlook of the Brahmos. Another great man of the Brahmo Samaj who was attracted by the magnetic personality of Sri Ramakrishna was Pandit Vijay Krishna Goswami. He was descended from the great Advaita Acharya, one of the foremost figures of Sri Chaitanya's group. Brought up in orthodox surroundings, Vijay early developed a passion for truth and the spiritual life. Like many other truth seekers of his day, he came in contact with Maharshi Devendranath Tagore and more particularly with Keshab Chandra Sen, by whom he was profoundly influenced. For the sake of truth, he cut himself off from his relatives and the insignia and privileges of a Brahmin to become a staunch supporter of Keshab and his Brahmo Samaj. But after the Kuch Behar marriage, he seceded from Keshab. He burned with a passion to realize God, and when he came in contact with Sri Ramakrishna, he was deeply impressed by his saintliness. They soon became friends. As the master wished to see him often, he visited Dakshineshwar whenever he had leisure. This association with Sri Ramakrishna had the effect of intensifying his yearning for God. In the course of his devotional exercises, he had various experiences which restored his faith in the different forms of the deity, which, under the Brahmo influence, he had regarded as superstitions. His reverence for Sri Ramakrishna was unbounded, and he openly acknowledged his deep indebtedness to him. Sometimes, though separated from the master by hundreds of miles, he was blessed with extraordinary visions of him. Though Keshab and Vijay became heads of rival parties, Sri Ramakrishna looked upon them and their parties with the same tenderness and love. He was sorely grieved at the misunderstanding between them and tried to effect a reconciliation. Finding that his views no longer coincided with those of the Brahmo Samaj, Vijay severed his connection with it and pursued in solitude a course of independent spiritual practice. Pandit Sivanath Sastri took his place. He too had the good fortune of coming in contact with Sri Ramakrishna, about whom he has left some personal reminiscences in his book entitled Men I Have Seen. It was in the year 1875, while engaged as the headmaster of a Calcutta school, that he first saw the master at Dakshineshwar. "I am so delighted to meet you," said Sri Ramakrishna. "Won't you come to see me now and then?" Savanath was much struck with his simplicity and devotion, and after many visits their relationship became very close. Savanath was amazed to find that the master had translated into action his great injunction as to the avoidance of lust and wealth. "I was present," he writes, "on occasions when coins were placed in his hand by an inquiring visitor as an experiment. The saint would go into one of his usual trances and would remain unconscious until they were removed." Savanath's line of thought did not require a man to renounce the world altogether. It sought to reconcile the world and God. So it was difficult for him to understand the full significance of Sri Ramakrishna's life of unimpeachable purity and renunciation of lust. He writes, "Ramakrishna was practically separated from his wife, who lived in her village home. One day, when I was complaining to some friends about the virtual widowhood of his wife, he drew me to one side and whispered in my ear, 'Why do you complain? It is no longer possible. It is all dead and gone.' Another time, as I was inveighing against this part of his teaching, and also declaring that our program of work in the Brahmo Samaj includes women, that ours is a social and domestic religion, and that we want to give education and social liberty to women, the saint became very much excited, as it was his fashion when anything against his settled conviction was asserted, a trait we so much liked in him, and exclaimed, 'Go, thou fool, go and perish in the pit that your women will dig for you.' Then he glared at me and said, 'What does a gardener do with a young plant? Does he not surround it with a fence to protect it from goats and cattle? And when the young plant has grown up into a tree and it can no longer be injured by cattle, does he not remove the fence and let the tree grow freely?' I replied, 'Yes, that is the custom with gardeners.' Then he remarked, 'Do the same in your spiritual life. Shun women in the beginning of that life. Become strong. Be full grown. Then you may seek them.' To which I replied, 'I don't agree with you in thinking that women's work is like that of cattle, destructive. They are our associates and helpers in all our spiritual struggles and social progress.' A view with which he could not agree, and he marked his dissent by shaking his head. Then referring to the closing time, he jocularly remarked, 'It is time for you to depart. Take care. Do not be late, otherwise your woman will not admit you into her room.' This evoked hearty laughter. In his reminiscences, Pundit Sivanath speaks in glowing terms of Sri Ramakrishna's love for him. On many occasions, the master clasped him to his bosom and requested him again and again to come to Dakshineshwar. Once when he failed to come after repeated invitations, the master went to see him. Such was his intense love for all who tried to lead a religious life. But in spite of his close intimacy, Pundit Sivanath had a strange idea about the master's transcendental state or loss of outward consciousness in samadhi. He saw in it only the outcome of a strange nervous disorder, under which, whenever there was any strong emotion or excitement, he would faint, losing consciousness for the time being, while his whole countenance assumed a radiant glow as a sign of the emotion working within. He had heard about Sri Ramakrishna's great austerities, especially as regards food and sleep, and therefore concluded that his trances were but the after effect of the austere life he had led during his youth. Nevertheless, be classified these fits of Sri Ramakrishna with those of Chaitanya and many other saints of a devotional temperament. Thinking that too great intimacy with Sri Ramakrishna was responsible for the spiritual revolution in the mind of Vijay, which made him leave the Brahmo Samaj, Sivanath was anxious to ward off this unwholesome influence, as he thought it to be, from his Samaj. Asked why he no longer frequented the Kali temple at Dakshineshwar, he replied that if he did so, other members of his Samaj would follow his example, and as a result the organization would collapse. Sri Ramakrishna heard of Sivanath's views, and seeing him one day at Dakshineshwar said to him, "Well, Sivanath, I hear that you call my samadhi a disease and say that I become unconscious at that time. You think day and night of all sorts of material things, and yet consider yourself to be of sound brain, while I who meditate on the eternal fountainhead of consciousness appear to you as deranged. A fine piece of reasoning. Savanath had nothing to say. One outstanding feature of Sri Ramakrishna's character was his extreme simplicity and utter abhorrence of show. He was the mother's child, an instrument upon which the Divine Mother was playing. Except in exalted moods when he lost his own individuality in the absorbing personality of the mother, he could not bear to hear himself praised. Another point of importance in connection with him was that he was literally all things to all men. Those closely associated with him knew of hundreds of instances where he suited his conversation to the mentality of the person addressed. For instance, he never spoke of jnana to a bhakta. If he were discoursing on the unreality of life with a jnani, and a bhakta happened to come in, he would change the subject at once and speak of the world as being real, the manifestation of the Lord. For he knew that while the jnani would not object to the interpretation of the world from the standpoint of bhakti, the devotee might be shocked to hear that the universe was unreal. His one idea was to help everyone towards the goal without disturbing his or her particular line of thought. This endeared him to all. Everyone saw in him the fulfillment of his own mode of sadhana, and he was, in reality, the consummation of them all. The following quotation from Savanath's book illustrates the point. I was seated with him, he writes, when a number of rich men from Calcutta arrived. The saint, in the midst of the conversation, went out of the room for some minutes. In the meantime, Hriday, his nephew and caretaker, began to extol his uncle before these men, narrating some of his great performances. Referring to the period of his greatest fervor, he said, so great was his love of God that he became insensible to all outward circumstances of life, apparently dead to all external events for some time. Just at that moment, Sri Ramakrishna entered the room. He heard Hridaya's last words and took him to task for trying to magnify him before others. The words I remember vividly. What a mean-spirited fellow you must be to extol me thus, before these rich men. You have seen their costly apparel and their gold watches and chains, and your object is to extract from them as much money as you can. What do I care what they think of me? Then turning to the men, he said, no, my friends, what he has told you about me is not true. It was not love of God that made me absorbed and indifferent to external life. I became positively insane for some time. The sadhus who frequented this temple told me to practice many things. I tried to follow them, and the consequence was my austerities drove me to insanity. Pundit Savanath took these words literally and so failed to understand their real import. But he had sincere respect for the master. He writes, I have seldom come across any other man in whom the hunger and thirst for spiritual life was so great and who had passed through so many privations and sufferings in the religious practices. I was convinced that he was no longer a sadhaka or a devotee under exercise, but was a siddha purusha or one who had attained direct vision of spiritual truth. My acquaintance with him, though short, strengthened many a spiritual thought in me. I owe him a debt of gratitude for the sincere affection he bore me. He was certainly one of the most remarkable personalities I've come across in life. Another leading Brahmo who profited by contact with Sri Ramakrishna was Trailokya Nath Sanyal, the famous singer and composer of Keshab Samaj, better known under the pseudonym of Chiranjeev Sarma. He was deeply attracted by the master, who loved him too. His emotions at seeing him so often in the superconscious state gave him themes for many devotional songs, which later touched thousands of hearts in Bengal. Amusing situations arose now and then. We give here an instance, though the incident happened some years later. Trailokya Nath wrote a Life of Keshab, in which he said that Sri Ramakrishna, after his contact with Keshab, modified his views about the householder's life, that he admitted it was possible to attain spirituality even by living in the world. The devotees of the master, of whom there were a number by this time, wanted this point cleared up. One day, Trailokya met the master at the house of Balaram Bose. We shall hear of him later on. In Calcutta, and Girish Chandra Bose, the actor-dramatist, raised the topic. Sri Ramakrishna, to Trilokya and others, to one who has attained the bliss of God, the world tastes as without salt. One who has a costly shawl cares no longer for a piece of broadcloth. Trilokya, I'm talking only of householders, not monks. Sri Ramakrishna, what is all this that you are saying? Those who advocate practicing religion while leading the worldly life, if they once taste the bliss of God, lose their relish for the world. All their enthusiasm for work vanishes. Gradually, as the bliss becomes more and more intense, they cannot work, and they seek that bliss alone. Can the pleasures of the senses compare with the bliss of God? Once a man tastes it, he runs wildly after it. Then who cares about the world? There may be innumerable lakes and rivers and seas full of water, but the chatak, an Indian bird, won't drink that water, though be dying of thirst. It would be waiting for a drop of rain under the constellation of Swati. All other water is like dust to it. They talk of harmonizing religion and enjoyment. When a man drinks just a little, he may see things in their proper order, but he can't do so if he is dead drunk. When a man tastes of the bliss of God, no other pleasure appeals to him. Then talk of lust and wealth is galling. The man becomes mad for God and has no liking for money, etc. Trilokya, if a man lives in the world, he must accumulate some money. He has to practice charity. Sri Ramakrishna, what? First accumulation of money and then God. And how great is their charity and kindness. They spend thousands of rupees in the marriage of their daughters, but the next-door neighbor with his family may be starving, and they feel constraint in giving him a handful of rice. They have to think long before doing so. While people are starving, they think, never mind whether neighbors live or die. It is of little consequence to me. Let me and my family live well. And they talk of kindness to all beings. Trilokya, among householders also there are good men. Pundarika Vidyanidhi, the follower of Sri Chaitanya, was a householder. Sri Ramakrishna, he had drunk of the bliss of God up to his neck. Had he drunk a little more, he could not have lived a householder's life. Trilokya kept silent. Girish, then what you have written in your book is wrong. I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.